Hey gang, I just wanted to talk quickly about how we tend to underestimate how much we can change in a year, but overestimate how much we can change in a month. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that we're pretty bad at telling time. I mean, even if you ask somebody to time out exactly 1 minute with no clock, no external reference, we're going to be way off depending on if we're excited or if we're bored, if we're nervous about something. Our sense of time is really connected to our emotional state, and especially in the longer term, things can get weird when you're talking about how much can you change in 1 month, in 4 weeks, 28 days, or 31 days, depending on the month. But a month, especially when, let's say, you're starting to work out, is not a lot of time. It is barely enough time for a habit to set. Barely, like when you start doing something, you have to make decisions to do something. You have to decide, when am I going to put it in my day? When am I going to go to the gym? When am I going to start? When am I going to eat right? What am I going to buy at the grocery store? What am I going to cook? How am I going to cook it? This is a new recipe. I've never done it before. All that stuff. Lots of decisions go into that process. And throughout that first month, you have to make a lot of decisions, and that takes a lot of energy to make those decisions, to plan, to negotiate those things. And that sucks for the first month. But after that first month, you might be making less decisions. It's more of a habit. You're just sort of going with it a little bit more. You're sort of like, oh, it's 5 p.m., going to the gym, no big deal. Rather than being like, oh, when am I getting my shoes ready? When am I going to get all this? When am I going to get my hair done? And like, what clothes am I going to wear? All that stuff. Less decisions, just more of a process that you go through, and that happens. In the first month, you sort of gets a little bit less plastic, little more set. Like clay is a little bit more solid, but after 6 months, pretty set. You're just going along with the flow. You're sort of doing it without making a decision. It's sort of a habit that you've incorporated into your life, and it's amazing what you can do in a full year's time. I've changed dramatically in the past year, especially because of my mindfulness habit. And what you need to think of yourself as isn't necessarily a really fast clipper boat, a boat that moves really, really fast and can juke and jive and change dramatically really quickly. What you have to think of yourself as a big freighter tanker, or a big cruise ship that even if or think of the Titanic, and if you see that iceberg coming up ahead of you, you need to identify it really far in advance, because if you turn that rudder as hard as you can, as fast as you can, it's not going to make a big difference in where you're going for a very long time. But if you got two big boats going next to each other and one starts going this way just a little bit, not too big of a deal, not too big of a separation now in that first month. But as you go, as time progresses, you can get very far away from each other. Big path divergence over the course of a long time, and that's what you should think about. But the problem is when you're in this big boat and you make that path, you start moving away, but you don't really see that difference, that space, that change that happens in that first month, and then you course correct back to what you were doing, and then you come back to normal, rather than keeping that habit in, letting it set, and then really seeing what happens after a couple months, after half a year, after a full year, that full change that can happen over the course of 12 months, 365 days. It's a big dramatic thing that, like, just a little bit of a course change can have a huge effect over a long term. And that's what I'd really like you to think about is, think about the last time you incorporated a habit into your life and really stuck with it and really let it change you over the longer course of time, rather than just sort of picking something up and then dropping it, picking something up and then dropping it. And I'm sure I can think of plenty of examples of times when I picked something up and dropped it, and then it was just like, oh, not for me, when it was really that I didn't let it soak in, set in as a habit, so I didn't have to make more decisions. I just had something else a part of my day, sort of like, flossing your teeth. If it's just something you do, you don't even have to make a decision. You just do it, and that's something that I've incorporated recently, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it now, but before it was hard. So consider it. Think about the changes you can happen that you can make over the course of a month versus the course of a year. Enjoy.